From Interfaith Alliance, this is State of Belief Radio. I'm Alliance President Reverend Paul Rauschenbusch, broadcasting this week from New York City.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam. Blessed are you, creator of all, who's created diversity, multiplicity within humanity.
That was Rabbi Sandra Lawson, a powerful voice at the intersection of identities far too often and even increasingly marginalized in our society.
We give thanks to you for the strength and resilience and contributions of my people, Black people, throughout history and today. And may we continue to strive for justice and equality for all people. And may the stories and memories of those who have come before us continue to inspire us to work towards a better, brighter future for all. Happy Black History Month, my friends. Amen.
As we see alarming erosion in the rights of women, increasing anti-Semitic rhetoric and violence, and a growing attempts to erase the truth of queer identity and experience, Rabbi Sandra speaks from a place of intimate, first-hand experience, and in her writing, her teaching, her music, and online, she articulates a powerful, positive moral mandate for all of us to do better. You can hear State of Belief on the radio and get the podcast on Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast platforms. Every week, I am in conversation with some of the most fascinating and impactful civic and religious leaders across the nation. Please subscribe to it today. State of Belief Radio is made possible in great part by the generous support of our listeners. If you've made a donation, thank you for helping get these conversations heard by more people who need them. If you haven't pitched in yet, information on how you can help keep this show on the air is available at stateofbelief.com. And you can find out more about the work at Interfaith Alliance and join us at interfaithalliance.org. And now to my guest. Rabbi Sandra Lawson, Inaugural Director of Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Reconstructing Judaism, is an activist, public speaker, and musician. She's also known as the TikTok Rabbi. And we'll get into all of that in this conversation. Rabbi Sandra, welcome to State of Belief Radio.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to spend some time with you, Paul.
We have so many bad examples of the internet, but actually you're someone who are introducing a whole new generation of people to what it can mean to be a religious leader, and a religious leader who shows up for people in moments of crisis, offering a word of hope, a challenging word. And so I just want to say, it's so good to speak with you, and I'm thrilled and grateful for all you're doing in the world right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
So maybe you can give us, some of the background of how you became this amazing rabbi who you are today. It didn't just happen. This is a journey. So can you just take us back to where one of the starting places for the journey for you?
Yeah, and I will. But I want to say first, just your intro when you were talking about me. Thank you. But it reminded me of something. I was in rabbinical school during the Trump election when Trump won. And around that same time, I got a grant to start a podcast. And I, like a lot of activists, I was not very happy about the election. And so I decided to spend my time on the internet focusing on positivity. And instead of, what's so wrong, I've already been down that route of activists being, my 20s being angry and hostile about stuff. And I didn't want to do that as a rabbi. So that was a conscious choice. And I just wanted to, and so I don't argue with people. There's less people who like to argue with me, but I try my best to spread a positive message about Judaism and spirituality as a whole. So I just wanted to, what you said, which I'm glad you said it just reminded me of one of the reasons why I do what I do.
Well, and it's an intentionality around it. Like that it doesn't, listen, staying positive in this moment is not something that just happens. You have to, it's a spiritual discipline. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with us. But some of our listeners may not be acquainted with you. And so I just would love to hear a little bit Going back before you went to rabbinical school, like
Hmm.
how you got here?
Yeah, so I mean, depending on how I feel at the moment, I'll start here. Because, tomorrow you might ask me, you get the same answer, but a different starting point. Um, you know, um, I think for many people, um, people come into our lives that can really completely change the trajectory of where we're going. Um, and for me, that was my friend Joshua Lesser. We're still friends today. And he might tell a different story, but I was a personal trainer. I was en route to get a master's degree in sociology with the plan of becoming an academic. That was the dream I had for myself, walking around campus, talking to students. In my fantasy, there wasn't a lot of teaching, but
And certainly no grading, but yeah, but there was a lot of walking around in a beautiful campus.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so that was the dream. And that's what I really wanted. And Josh hired me as his personal trainer, and we became friends. And he says that well, first of all, I have to say, like when I met him, I had not had positive experiences with clergy. Um, my only relationship with clergy, with Christian clergy, who many of them thought I was going to go to hell, probably because I'm queer. Um, but I didn't have a lot of relationships with clergy anyway, because I wasn't raised in a religious environment. Every time I encountered a religious figure of some kind, it wasn't a great one. And I grew up in the era of the three channels and the televangelist, who were not very good people. you know, um, I talk about like Reverend Jim Jones and seeing that the murder of people on television, and the Bakers and the Falwells, and well, Falwell wasn't that bad, but like there's another guy. Oh yeah, the dude who Roberts, who said God was going to kill him if we didn't raise $1 million, and like if he didn't raise like $1 million or something
Yeah.
like that, and he lived a long life, and I was like, what is wrong with these people? But I mean, and they were all over because we had three channels and they were on. Um, and so when I met him, he was different. And now I realize he's not that different than many clergy. I just hadn't met people like him. And I remember asking him, like, what kind of rabbi are you? Because I didn't know much about rabbis either. And, he had a joke for it, but he was also a queer rabbi, like a gay rabbi. And I had met a few gay clergy, but not a lot, like mostly through like some of the MCC folks that I had met over time. And they also tried to get me to go to their church, and I wasn't that interested. Um, but he says that I started asking more questions about Judaism, and I also had a Jewish girlfriend at the time, and that curiosity turned into going to his community, and that curiosity led me to down a Jewish path, and I was happy being a Jew in a pew. I really was. Still, I finished my master's degree, still planning to get a PhD in sociology, but I noticed that I had more of a pull towards Judaism, especially when I started doing activist as a Jewish person. And I started building relationships with other clergy who, around 2004, shortly after the Supreme Court said that, people like me were not going to go to jail for our relationships, many states had started to wanting to change their constitutions to ban gay marriage. And I, as an activist, I was just like, I'm not trying to get married. I'm just excited I'm not going to go to jail for having sex. And quickly found myself on the defensive, not just me, but other activists. And I started working with other clergy. Before I started working with other clergy, I started working with other activists. And that's when I learned about coalition building and politics. And I didn't like it very much. It was very hostile. I mean, we were all supposed to be on the same page, but people were arguing about money and what was the right strategy. And it was a racially diverse coalition. And many white folks had not spent a lot of time with black people, and many queer activists hadn't spent a lot of time with straight clergy or straight folks, and then I got an invitation from a clergy friend of mine who's also named Paul, and he's like, "Why don't you come to this we're having a interfaith clergy meeting or something like that." And I was like, "I'm not clergy." He's like, "Yeah, but you're Jewish and we need more diversity. Plus you're black and queer." And probably in his mind, he was just thinking about boxes. I don't know. And I found that I was having many of the same conversations that I was having politically, but with clergy folks. Um, but everyone was trying to find common ground.
Mm.
Everyone was trying to find a way to work together. So some of the clergy that I met, well, they were all Christian because at that time interfaith meant Christian and Jewish, for folks in the South working on this stuff. Um, I I remember working with this radio evangelist guy named Reverend Love. That's all I remember. That's what he called himself. I'm sure Reverend Love thought I was going to hell. I really do. I don't think he thought much about Jewish folks, and I don't think he thought much about queer folks. But we agreed that the state had no business in our bedrooms.
Uh-huh.
So him and I went to a college campus and started talking about this Constitution Amendment. And I was really good at partnering with other clergy, talking about Judaism. And I wanted to do more of that. And I started thinking less and less about getting a PhD, which I thought was nuts because I had planned out this road of
Yeah.
how to do that. And this
Yeah.
other path of becoming a rabbi was like, made no sense to me how that was going to happen. And um, from that moment to about 6 years later, I decided to go to rabbinical school because became less interested in getting a PhD, and I wanted to investigate this path a little bit more, and here I am.
Yeah. I mean it is an amazing, like,
Mhm.
looking back, you can see the path, and while
Mhm.
you're walking it though, it always is like, I can't even believe I'm on this path. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
I when I went to seminary, I did it almost because it was the craziest thing I could possibly do. And
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
and then like as I kept walking, I was like, oh my God, maybe actually this is exactly what I'm supposed to do because it's
Hmm.
so crazy for me to
Right,
be
right.
here. And like someone like me, I was always like, someone like me is never going to be a religious leader. But
Hmm.
you come at this, you come at this moment in America where we have just incredible vitriol against
Hmm.
and I would say active efforts at subjugation of black people,
Yeah, yeah.
rising anti-Semitism, the attempted like kind of rollback of LGBTQ rights, especially around trans issues. And so you come at this moment, honestly, with all of these identities, and
Hmm.
I, and you have a commitment to being productive and positive in the
Yeah.
way that you interact. I mean, I'm just curious, like, you know, how you manage to move forward in a time where it feels like so much of who you
Mhm.
are is is under attack.
Yeah. Let me breathe. So
I'm
my
sorry. I'm
initial,
sorry to like, I don't
no,
mean
no,
to
no,
put that
no,
on you. I just, it
no.
just feels like, it feels like a very terrifying moment.
It is. And what I'll say to that is we've already won. That's the thing. We've already won the culture war. We've already won, and the people pushing back on it don't like it. And they're trying to make us go back
Ooh,
to a
I
different time period.
that is amazing. That is amazing. The victory is won, and what we're
Yeah,
seeing is people are writhing and angry.
right.
That is an amazing perspective. And so, how do you then? I think that's a really what I like about that is it doesn't make us defensive.
Right.
It actually puts us back on like, okay,
Right.
we are not in a defensive stance. We're in a stance of holding our ground and saying this is just the way it is. But what do we do? I mean, I'm going to Florida next week
Hmm.
to give a talk in Southwest
Hmm.
Florida where they feel totally under
Right.
attack. The school boards, queer people. I'm just like, what? for you, as someone who shows up in such a particular way, what is your sense of what's going on in Florida with Governor DeSantis and all the ways that they're trying to erase
Mhm.
Black history? I mean, it does feel like a reaction to something that a certain part of the population is terrified of.
Yeah. Like, I don't know much about Ron DeSantis until he ran for governor, and I know more about him now than I did then. And I see him as somebody who is playing a political game with people's lives, which is really sad. And what I see happening is that now, when I said we've already won, if we don't stay vigilant and pay attention, all that can be rolled back, and laws can be snuck in that people aren't aware of. That's how we got to this abortion mess. Like
Right.
that
Right.
people weren't paying attention. People were like, okay, uh, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, and the Supreme Court has said so, not thinking there was a possibility that that could be changed. And so what I see happening is that I do believe we've already won, and it's still a game or still a war, or however you want to phrase it. I don't really like war language, but if we don't pay attention, if we don't vote, if we don't do our responsibility as citizens, we can lose all those things, and people will
Yeah.
be surprised.
Yeah.
We have some of the lowest voter turnout than any other country. Part of that is because it's not a day off. Um, it's not a requirement.
Yeah.
But it just saddens me, and because many people think that they can't change the system, and also our system, from the very beginning, was designed to privilege one group of people over another group of people, including how we vote. I mean, gerrymandering, instead of like, democratically drawing lines, people draw lines so that they can win.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
No,
and that's
absolutely.
politics.
I'm Paul Rauschenbusch. My guest is Rabbi Sandra Lawson, inaugural director of racial diversity, equity, and inclusion at Reconstructing Judaism. You felt like a kind of kinship with Judaism. You said in some other places that you felt liberated
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
and that's like so powerful. Talk a little bit about what it means to show up in Jewish spaces that are predominantly white and often assumptively white, even though that's not the reality of global
Mhm.
Judaism. How do you help the Jewish community really welcome and embrace the diversity that is within Judaism?
So what's interesting is that, as a rabbi, I spent all those years of training. Like, for many rabbis, it takes 5 to 6 years to become a rabbi. A lot of that is language acquisition. But as a keeper of this history that's thousands of years old, that's how I see it. Like, it's my responsibility as a rabbi to carry forward this tradition that has existed for, centuries. And because I know text and I know this history and I know what's written, because I can read the written language, that's another thing. Not having access to the original language for many Jews or people can be challenging, and people don't know what the text says. And so having rabbis interpret text. Now, that is changing because we are translating a lot of our texts into English. There's a wonderful website, if you don't know about it, it's called safaria.org. Um, but when I go into Jewish communities as a rabbi or as an educator, as a teacher or representative of Reconstructing Judaism, I'm bringing this history of what our texts say about diversity, or what our texts say about, bringing in different voices. Like right now, I mean, I know when this airs, it'll be different, but right now we are in the Torah portion called Yitro. Um, Yitro is Moses's father-in-law, and it's often translated as Jethro, which makes me think of the Beverly Hillbillies. But anyway, um, so Yitro is the only Torah portion named after a non-Israelite, or we would say a non-Jew today. And he changed it, and as the outsider, someone who's not in the community, completely changes the judicial system in the Torah. He's just like, because Moses is like hearing people's complaints and fights and whatever, and he's litigating all this stuff, and then he's like, you can't do this. This is like too much of a burden. And I joke sometimes he probably wanted more grandchildren, but he helps Moses uh, create a pluralistic democratic system that we still kind of use today. And I would, if I was in a community right now, I would bring that text forward and talk about the importance of having diverse voices. Just because we've always done something a certain way or always seen the Jewish community a certain way doesn't mean that it can't change, or doesn't mean that we can't have other ways of looking at stuff. So when people see people like me, I'm Black, I'm queer, and they're really kind of confused about how I'm a rabbi, I can tell them how that's possible. And I can say what for, Jews like to argue, but like for folks that like to bring up texts about why I can't be a rabbi, I have other texts that I can bring up about why I am a rabbi and how that's possible.
Well, and also I think that, there's an idea that, okay, you have to look a certain way, you have to have a certain gender or whatever. And then, but I would invite anyone who has a question to kind of take some time, listen to someone, and with you, I just feel like, you're a rabbi because you're a teacher, and I've learned from you, and many, many other people have. And so, this is, I think it's an opportunity. And I think wider Judaism in America, at least, is really actually, for the most part, eager for it. They are trying. I mean, but I think its change is slow, and my guess is that there's been a lot of, perhaps hurt along the way. But I'm just really grateful for the Jewish part of my family. That is, I'm grateful for your presence and the widening, and the invitation. It's so important.
I just want to say about that, like Judaism, the Jewish culture in America is a microcosm of what's happening in the larger society. So the same challenges, all of the same stuff that is playing out in larger society is also playing out in the Jewish community. And so for many Jews, someone like me becoming a rabbi is exciting because they see it as the future. And for other folks, it is scary because they worry about what it says about them, what they're going to lose, and why someone like me is challenging for some Orthodox folks, not all, I mean, some Orthodox folks. I know a lot of Orthodox rabbis who completely embrace someone like me, but people who are not rabbis or who are holding on to a past, even if they themselves are not Orthodox, but they're still lifting that up, someone like me is scary. But for a vast majority, this is exciting to see. Yeah. More diversity in the rabbinate, more women, more people of color, more queer people.
Yeah, I actually think that's so interesting that the Jewish community in America is a microcosm of America as a whole. I think it's true. All the issues, all of the challenges, all of the excitement and the opportunity all meshed into one.
Right.
Up next, more with Rabbi Sandra Lawson. If you miss any part of today's program, you can hear full episodes of State of Belief anytime on our website. You'll also find links to the topics we discussed this week, extended interviews and transcripts, and an archive of past shows, all at stateofbelief.com. You're listening to State of Belief Radio, made for such a time as this. How are you understanding the anti-Semitism, this incredible, challenging, and for many terrifying rise of anti-Semitism right now? I mean, I have literally talked to several people who are thinking of leaving the country. And ironically, terribly ironically, some of them thinking about going to Germany because they feel it would be safer. How do you understand anti-Semitism right now, and maybe some ways that our listeners can be part of a mobilization to counteract anti-Semitism right now?
So I hope I have a lot to say about this particular subject, and hopefully I'll remember it all. So anti-Semitism was brought to the United States from Europe. It was brought here. And as a Christian-centric society, it's always been an underbelly. Many Jews who immigrated from Europe, America was a safe haven. It was the first country to grant unconditional citizenship to Jews who came from Europe. And for many Jews, wanting to desperately assimilate into American culture because they were willing to like, okay, that's the past. I'm here now and be an American. And in many ways, for those Jews, their assimilation is very similar to other European folks in some ways. But for the longest time, Jews weren't considered white. And that changed, in the middle of the 20th century. So the United States is a society that's DNA is designed to privilege one group of people over another people. So white people and whiteness has evolved over time. White people have more privileges, and our system is designed to privilege whiteness over darker skinned people. Our system is designed to privilege Christianity over other symbols, other religions. And if you understand anti-Semitism, you understand that when different times and different cultures, anti-Semitism rises. And Jews have always been a scapegoat for the problems in our society, always been a scapegoat for problems in all societies. And anti-Semitism has also evolved where you don't necessarily have to subscribe to Christianity to be an anti-Semite. But it's so ingrained in Christian societies that people don't even recognize anti-Semitic tropes. One example I often use is a college student said to me, I believe a Christian college student in the religious center of the college said, I believe in the loving God of the New Testament, not the wrathful God of the Old Testament. And I was like, ow! and in that moment, I don't think she had ever thought that there was something wrong with that statement. That was just what she had heard. And that sparked a different conversation later on with other people who heard that. And it was just like, I never thought about it before. And there are so many anti-Semitic tropes. In a similar way, there's so many racist tropes that people don't even think about. I also think that the Jewish community, the larger white Jewish community, or white passing coded folks who are coded as white in the Jewish community, can learn a lot from how Black and brown people experience racism. As a Black person, I know racism exists in our society. For many Jews, they didn't think much about anti-Semitism. They didn't really thought it maybe was something of the past. Black people function in our society knowing that it's a racist society. Doesn't mean people are bad, but we understand that racism has evolved over time and that racism shows up frequently because it's a system. It's not just about individual bias. And for many of my white colleagues and my white Jewish friends, to understand how anti-Semitism works on the right and on the left. So on the right leaning extreme folks, it is really hard to do any education on anti-Semitism because it is core to the belief of how they function as extreme right folks. It is the core of how, and I'm not talking Republican, I'm talking right-wing extremist.
Yeah.
But when anti-Semitism shows up on the left, which is where many Jews spend their time, education can go a long way to like, I can imagine some people would have just dismissed that student that I mentioned, but let me give you some education. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that. I would never want to hurt you. You only said that as a student because that's what you were told your entire life. But now you're out with other people and you're getting a different perspective. And so that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I think that is really helpful. And, it is... there's a way in which it feels like some people are almost, we talk about dog whistles, but it's almost as though they've become explicit. I mean, and a little bit, it feels more the mainstreaming. I mean, to have to have someone who's essentially a white Christian nationalist be the Republican nominee in Pennsylvania, it felt like it felt very intimidating.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I think, nice white Christian folks that would not want to be intimidating, but they don't, again, the education piece, they don't understand like why it's so intimidating to say we need a Christian nation. And what that means to everybody else, including me as a Christian who's not the right kind of Christian. When you say we need a Christian nation, what you're basically saying is that everybody else is second-class status. And Jews take that really seriously, as they should, especially since, while I would agree there has been a Christian-centric, reality in America, we can state that this country is not a Christian nation, and that's a good thing. It's a nation for everybody. And we have, I feel like that's something we have to claim right now, that this is, it is not a Christian nation.
Except I will push you on that. I mean, I agree with you. And our system as a nation is a Christian nation. So
I think that there has been a privileging of it. Yeah. And there is the, officially in the Constitution, we do not have a religion.
Right.
And so, I just think like recognizing that, and that, President George Washington wrote to the congregation in Newport saying there will be no one tradition that will be privileged. Right. Now, in reality, we know that is not, but it's also important to recognize that there were these signifiers in the beginning that actually we are better as a nation that invites a multiplicity, a diversity, that is actually our strength. It's the genius, if we have one, of America, that actually that all people are invited. But I agree completely. Talk to me a little bit about how you're we're in Black History Month. So tell me how that feels to you in this 2023 Black History Month.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to, like on social media, I try to always frame stuff in reference to what's happening Black History Month. Like when you're every day on my Instagram for the whole month, I shared like images and stories of different leaders. And I think one year that year, instead of showing the normal pictures of Dr. King, I showed the ones of him being arrested. And, what I think is kind of sad right now is that when we're talking about DeSantis, and it's not just him, like he's just a product. He wants to win the nomination, and for many people, I understand he's probably more palatable than Trump. Until we actually embrace the fullness of our history. The fullness of our history, that, yes, George Washington, a father of our country, but also a slave owner. Like, right. I can honor both, and many white people can't. They any negativity about Jefferson or whatever, instead of like being truthful about the fact that he owned slaves, or they own slaves, is like, Ashanda, like, you shouldn't be saying that that's just bad. Like, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
And so if we don't start talking about the truth and holding both truths, we're never going to get anywhere. We're going to be revisiting this again. And that's what happens every so many years. We revisit this. We've been where we are right now. We've been here before. It just looks a little different.
It is shocking to me that the brazenness, frankly, of it is just saying, okay, anything that makes anyone uncomfortable about our past, I mean, guess what? It is a very uncomfortable past. And you know who it's really, the people who suffered and came through and are now contributing so much to our country. Mm-hmm. And you want to erase the history of everything they went through. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is It's absolutely outrageous, and that you would say, "Oh, well, we're not going to have a Black History AP
Right.
course."
Or deny
Be-
that Black people built this country and participated in its greatness. That's the other
Absolutely,
thing.
100%.
Right.
I mean, it is it is the idea that you can't handle that.
Hmm.
And yet you want to move forward and you want everybody to come together. And why are we talking about these negative things? It's just
Hmm.
not the way it works. And it doesn't mean that we can't move forward. It
Right.
means that we have to move forward with some truth telling.
Right.
And and I have to say this just because people don't know it. There were reparations when slavery ended.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Guess who got the reparations?
Yeah.
Slave owners.
Yeah. Yeah.
If people don't know that, I mean, I just think like that's like a piece of history that people should know.
Hmm.
Is that the only people who got reparations were the slave owners who lost their property?
And then our country has given land away, to you. They, pushed out indigenous folks and gave land to immigrants coming from Europe. It was a
Yeah.
giveaway. Like,
Yeah, right. So it's we just need to remember but it doesn't mean that we can't move. It just we need to move
right.
forward with intentionality, and so I think that that's just so. And again, this is where you're kind of it's your positivity feels to me like it's not Pollyanna. It's not
Right.
sanitized positivity. It's saying that we're going to know all of this and still move forward. I'm Paul Rauschenbusch. My guest is Rabbi Sandra Lawson, the TikTok Rabbi. I want to talk a little bit about how you understand the internet, because one of the things that I'm very concerned about, and I think you might know this, is just how religion interacts with the internet, and how right now, of course, there's so much hate online and
Hmm.
people getting attacked online, and specifically Muslims and Jews are some of the most attacked online
Hmm. Hmm.
for who they are. Now, how do you understand the way social media works in your world, and how do you understand specifically how hate kind of manifests itself on the internet?
So what I appreciate right now about the internet is I grew up at a time period where there was no such thing. You know, like um, that I have boundaries online. People may not see them, but I do have boundaries online. Young people today, I really am concerned about how they use the internet, how they see themselves. Um, because people like to show all the good stuff and none of the bad stuff. And I read an article about from it came across my feed. I think it was called the alienization of plastic surgery. How these were plastic surgeons calling out the cry that, you know, I skimmed these art, but like we're creating aliens by making people look a certain way and having other people aspire to look like that, and that's not normal. Um, and so I don't have children, but I would be, if as I can if I can imagine as someone who's not afraid of the internet, I would want to teach them how to use the internet responsibly. And I worry that many parents are not having conversations because they themselves don't understand the internet.
Right,
Um,
right.
and
I remember when I was at Huffington Post, we had a group of young people come in, and we had these talks, and we were, it was part of AOL, and so there was this big group of young people, and I was one of the talks, and one of the other speakers who worked at AOL said, "Oh, well, you're young, so you know all about the internet," and I was like, "Wait, no, you
right,
don't.
right,
You just this is like you're in water, and you don't even know you're in water." And
yeah,
you don't know where the dangerous tides are. And you don't know, like, that the internet was not built for you.
right,
The internet was built, for other people, and now it's built for money mostly.
right,
And
yeah.
so, and the internet wants to track you. The internet wants to know everything about you. And so it's just people, yeah, I agree with you completely. Like, part of what you've just said is like, how do you show up online and make boundaries, and
Hmm.
specifically like, how do you inoculate yourself
Hmm.
against some of the stuff that comes at you? Because my guess is that you get some stuff coming at you.
Yeah, I want to tell you this before I get to that. I want to tell you the story. So when I was at Elon, there were two of my former Hillel presidents that were about to graduate. And there was a bar on campus. And so to celebrate, I took them out. And I don't know if I bought the wine, I don't know, but we were at this bar. We were like drink some wine and celebrate because they were graduating. Yes, they were over 21. And at the end, we were going to take a picture. And, they had, in my memory, it was sort of like the typical college picture, tongue hanging out, glass of wine. And I said, put the glass away. Let's just take a picture. And they kept trying to bring the glass of wine back into the picture. And this lady sitting, after like three times, this lady sitting next to them was like, she's trying to save your career or something like that.
Right, right.
Like, just because the internet is forever. And I
Right.
already know folks rabbis who have been, because other rabbis have told me that they didn't get a job because a particular image showed up of the rabbi, and they didn't think that was very rabbinic.
Yeah.
So back to the other thing, when I started using, so I've always been an early adapter to things like Classmates or Friendster or MySpace.
Wow, wow. Okay.
Um,
In case
yeah.
listeners don't get that, that means she's old. She doesn't look it. She looks like she's in her 20s, but that means she's old.
And I started using those things because partly because I moved around a lot, and I always wanted to, there was, like if you're a kid now and you lose track of people, then you just don't care because I grew up before emails and and thank goodness for Facebook because been able to catch up with people and see where they are in their lives. But when I went to rabbinical school, one of my for the first year when I applied for internships. Now I have to say, you can't there's only so much you can learn in the classroom. And internships are crucial to the development of rabbis. And because again, there's only so much you can learn in the classroom. And being out in the field working as a rabbi can help you learn. And I was having trouble with that because people could not get past my skin color. And there's stories that I could tell for days, but I was like, I don't want to graduate from the Reconstruction Rabbinical College and still have to explain to people how I exist. So I started to use the internet to teach and to sort of show people my experiences in rabbinical school, and also so people would my plan was by the time I graduated, I would have enough name recognition, or at least people had gotten used to seeing me, that it would be a non-issue anymore. And so that was my initial goal for using, for sharing on Facebook and Twitter. And over time that has evolved and changed. But that's why I started doing it. So my goal was to make sure I could get a job and to lessen the racism that I would experience. And so I stayed focused on that, and that helped me to sort of not deal with the other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually, because I was an early champion of the internet as a possible positive tool.
Yes.
Because the gatekeeper, you talked earlier about like the three channels.
Right.
And the three channels decided what you were going to know.
Right.
And the three channels kind of like were the gatekeepers. And in some ways that was comforting because you could, a lot of nasty wouldn't get at you, but also it limited your exposure to a lot. It also made a few people the producers of everything. And now what you did is said, I'm going to produce myself.
Right.
And I'm going to show the world, and I'm going to introduce myself so that I don't have to rely on someone else to do it. And that's a remarkable change. And I don't think we're still at the very beginning of this technology. Like someone's going to come back and find this interview and say, "Oh, look how that's so cute they did that with their chiseled rocks." You know what I mean? Like we're at the beginning of the internet. The internet is the most like significant technological revolution ever to hit humankind, and it's going to change everything, and already has. And so, and part of that is the radical democratization of who can do what. And even though there's still systems that are controlling it. So what we see now is that people like you can produce yourself and get out into the world and people can learn from you. We're also seeing that very bad actors can do the same thing and get into people's heads and get into, and find other bad actors and plot very bad things. And so the internet, like, it's a blessing and a curse, but it requires us to really think about it. And I often say to religious leaders, when was the last time you preached about the internet? Not just saying you got to get off the internet because, and take a sabbatical. That's not enough. What about, this is the most important impact on on the world society. What is the religious voice? When 10 Jews are gathered online, is that a minyan?
I think so, but
you think so, but
Right.
but others don't. And answering that question, 2 or 3 Christians are gathered online. Is Jesus there? I think it gets into, what do we mean by our bodies? What do we mean by, like, what does it mean to be together? So it really is like the question of what the technology means for religion and our theological assumptions or our religious assumptions is just really exciting to think about and under-examined, I would say, by most people who are, I studied 13th century Christian theology at seminary, and I don't even know, I can't say anything about it. But, I kind of wish a little bit more time had been spent, because that was just when the internet was happening in the 90s. So give us, you started this conversation saying you've been intentionally positive. What are a few things that give you cause for hope right now?
The same thing I said earlier is that we've already won. As a Black queer person who I'm a product of 2 parents that made the migration from the Jim Crow segregated South and found their way to St. Louis and met and had me and my brother, and they were parents, their parents experienced some horrors that I probably will never even understand, and my parents shielded me from it. I see the progress. I see that we are no longer that same country of my grandparents, thank God, of my grandparents' generation. And at the same time, bad actors have found a way to keep bringing that stuff back, but just, evolving a little bit. For example, the number of white extremists or white extreme politicians that like to say that they are experiencing racism just makes me crack up. But they say that enough that people are starting to believe it. Like, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I don't think anybody on this call takes seriously, was on somewhere talking to some educator or some school administrator about how CRT was racist against white folks. I'm just like, you don't even understand what the hell it is. Like, but I do see the progress that has been made, and we still have a long way to go. I already forgot your question.
No, it's about hope. And I think that, recognizing that things can change. I think sometimes, the paralysis can set in and say, but things can change, but they generally don't change without a lot of people coming together to make a decision that we're going to change.
I was going to say, too, that I remember after the 2016 election, as somebody who'd been through previous, elections that weren't so great, for the first time, I saw more people on my side of the line, than on the other side of the line. And I was like, wow. Yes, because of how our system worked, the person who got the popular vote did not win the election, but that wasn't the first time that it happened. But there were more people that agreed with people like me than I think ever before, and I don't forget that.
Yeah. I think that's so helpful to remember that we are not the minority. We actually represent the direction that the country wants to go
Right.
in. And there were polling just last year that 70% of America wants a religiously diverse country. They want a diverse country. They believe that that's what America should be.
Right.
And so we have to remember that we're actually working for an America that people really want to live in and want
Hmm.
everybody, treat everybody with respect. And this, the Christian nationalists and those who would erase history in order to protect some sort of, delusion of American history, they're on the wrong side, and we have to
Right.
just and hopefully, if we can invite them, like you invited that girl who said, "I believe in the loving, Jesus." Rather, if you can invite people to say, "Hey, you know what? You can learn about our history and move forward with all of us together. It
Right.
doesn't require you getting shunted to the side. It just requires us having a circle rather than someone in the middle and the rest of
Right.
us is surrounding them, And so I think that what you're doing is just so hopeful. I hope everyone tell us all your social media channels and your website so that our listeners get a chance to experience you for themselves, because it'll make your day better.
Yeah.
That much I will promise you.
So I will do that, and you can do it with this what you will. I was talking to my supervisor, the CEO of Reconstructing Judaism, before you and I started talking. And, one of the things that she reminds me of is that my strength is in relationships. I like having relationships with people. I like talking to people. I'm the type of person, please pick up the phone and call me, versus sending me different emails that I can't keep track of. And so I'm saying this because, and I hope this helps your listeners. There's a friend of mine, I've sort of lost track of him, but there's this guy I know that because of circumstances, we became friends. In any other world, we would never have been friends. We really weren't. He's, a straight-laced white dude, button tie, Republican, really believed that they didn't know anything about Bull Connor and his dogs in the 60s, thought that, we went from slavery to Dr. King, and like to use the sanitized text of Dr. King. I'm saying all that to say this. We would argue about all kinds of stuff. And when Trump was elected in 2016, he sent me a message and he said, "I'm scared. And I'm texting you because you are the only person in my orbit that I can tell that to." And I was like, damn, I didn't talk to him for a long time. And I was like, wow. And because we built this relationship, because again, circumstances put us together, he had somebody that he could talk to. All his other friends were very different. So I'm just saying, relationships are so important if we ever plan to change things. And I'm not saying that people should put themselves in harm's way and have relationships with people that are harmful, but building relationships, whether they're online or in person, is so important. Okay, my social media handles.
Listen, that is a great
Yeah.
story, and such a powerful lesson about not, you could also have just decided, sorry, I'm not, you've never heard of that? Okay. Come to me when come to me
Right.
never, or come to me when you've had, you could have just been dismissive. Instead, you tried to engage him with, again, without, harming yourself or diminishing yourself. And as much as we can do that, I do, I need to learn that, because I get very what, but it is really that can make a difference. And all
Right.
of us have learned at some point. None of us came out knowing everything.
Right.
And that has been my story. It's, part of your story, everybody's story. We all need to learn.
Yeah.
And someone can help us learn and help us grow. And maybe we can be that person who can help others grow. So I just love that story.
Yeah.
Okay, now We're going to hear all the handles. People,
Yeah.
get out your pens or get out your little pens. How about that? Yeah, back into the
Yeah.
80s.
So it'll be pretty boring though, because I have branded myself and have changed some handles over time. But you can find me pretty much any social media platform as Rabbi Sandra. So at Rabbi Sandra. So I'm at Rabbi Sandra on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I have two Facebook pages. One is like says Rabbi Sandra Lawson. That's my professional page, and my personal page is Rabbi Sandra.
All right. All
Almost
right.
every platform that I can think of is at Rabbi Sandra.
At Rabbi Sandra. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
talking
thanks for having me.
today
It's great
on
talking to you.
State of Belief. I just love talking to you. You're inspiring, and you're as hopeful in this kind of conversation as you are in your all of your social media. I hope someday I actually get to see you in person. So
We'll make it happen.
let's try to make that happen at some
It'll
point.
happen. I believe
Rabbi
it.
Sandra Lawson, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
And with that, I'm afraid that's all the time we've got for this week's show. We need your help keeping this show on the air. I hope you'll consider being a partner in this crucial work by making a financial contribution today. Information on how to donate is available at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. And you can be part of making sure informative and encouraging voices like these are heard by sharing this program with friends and family. Let's get more people listening and more people taking part in these conversations, both on and off the air. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the weekly State of Belief podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And join the conversation. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at State of Belief and share State of Belief with the people in your life. State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is in production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member of Interfaith Alliance today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I'll be talking with Amanda Tyler, Executive Director of the Joint Baptist Committee for Religious Liberty, which organized the movement Christians Against Christian Nationalism. I cannot wait. Until then, I'm Paul Rauschenbusch, and that's State of Belief.
Think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going